We're coming to you live from Cape Town in South Africa, where things are rather heated on the waterfront. On the agenda for today is day zero in some parts of the country. Why is that happening? The unintended consequences of load shedding on water supply, the recent WISA conference, as well as some information on the International Water Association in Copenhagen. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is the Water Hour. I'm your host, Bridgetti Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa, and this live stream is brought to you by Benoit Media and the Water Chamber. And we are going live a bit on a prayer today, just so that you know, with load shedding happening all over the country, networks failing, there's a lot of issues that we're currently dealing with in South Africa. So bear with us if things go tiny bit pear-shaped, but we're hoping to bring you the show. So on our panel today, with me in the studio today, is the South African Water Chamber's Fred Platt, Benoit Leroy, and Professor Hamanth Kasan. So let's welcome them to the show today. Gentlemen, welcome. Great to have you join us. Now, I'm hoping that somehow Benoit is able to join us, whether it's just voice only. I know that he's currently got a power outage going on there, so we'll see where we can go with this. As always, Fred, I'm going to start with you. If you can just give the audience an introduction to the South African Water Chamber, just give us a little bit of a background on why it was established, what function it has, who it serves, and who you would like to see join the South African Water Chamber in its mission.
Thank you, Bridgetti, and welcome to the viewers and the listeners. Yeah, I suppose I could give no better reason than what you're reading in the newspapers and seeing on television every day. The South African Water Chamber was established out of an understanding that water is fundamental to the functioning of the economy. That it is the ultimate economic enabler without which our economy cannot function and we cannot grow. It is also the underpin for for respect and dignity of any community. And obviously, years ago, we saw exactly what is happening now as a potential issue, which we cannot leave to government or to any other party. So as business, we need to get involved. We need to have a strong voice. We need to have a central interface where we can engage with government and other stakeholders around the issues, and where we can drive the change that we need to see. Now, today we're obviously going to be speaking about so many of the problems that we're experiencing at the moment, the intersection of energy and water, the lack of investment in water infrastructure over time, the lack of necessary execution skills, the lack of information at a central point where decision-making can take place. All of which are critical success factors to be addressed if we're going to take the country forward. And I reiterate, water is the underpin on which any economic growth needs to take place. So the South African Water Chamber is representative of the water industry in helping government to develop plans, to drive execution, and ultimately to enable that business and the economy within South Africa, and to deliver on the promises that had been made in the democratic dispensation. So we would really urge all businesses to get involved with the South African Water Chamber and to help us to drive not only an agenda, but to drive change, to drive projects, to drive the execution, and to drive the delivery in order to redress the challenges that we are facing at the moment.
Thank you very much for that background there, Fred. And hopefully, you know, if you're watching this and you haven't yet joined the South African Water Chamber, do go to the website. It's SA Water Chamber, and all the information is there. You know, because each one of us can be the change we'd like to see. Water is everything, as Fred just rightly pointed out. You know, without water, we can't live. Now, Benoit is joining us via voice only because he's got some net issues going on there. Benoit, can you give us a summary of what's happening up in Gauteng? With some areas are without water, and can you tell us why that's happening?
Am I coming through here because we've been internet shared also for the last 2 weeks?
No worries, we can hear you loud and clear. Fred and Hamanth, are you able to hear? Because I can hear him coming through.
Yes, it's fine.
Perfect. Go ahead, please, Benoit.
Okay. Yeah. So look, we've got the leaking bucket syndrome that we were talking about, where 40% from a block system, namely Rand Water, is in fact so every 100 liters, 41 liters is not being delivered by the metros to the end user. So we're not talking about leaks at the end user level. That's the first thing. Secondly, the reservoirs are designed for 48 hours of residence time, which for time and not load shedding, because we didn't have that. We expanded measures to a great extent without upgrading the network, the pipework, without upgrading the reservoirs and the likes. We have less retention time. So Joburg's on 36 hours in theory, in practice not. Then, you know, City of Joburg assets, and it has a backlog of 23 billion, and it's spending 1.2 billion numbers, because we're in a downward spiral, and it's getting, you know, when you get into an inverted spin with an aircraft, if you pull the stick more, you get tighter, and so we're not spending the money, and it's getting tighter. So what happens is the infrastructure is not having the residence time it needs. We've got double the population in the last 30 years in Gauteng, from 7.5 to 15. Plus, we have infrastructure that is 40 years and replace that infrastructure. What happens with load shedding now? Forget the temperature. The temperature is the last straw, the heat wave. So with load shedding, what's happening is the system. We have between 400 and 500 pumps in a large metro like Johannesburg, Cape Town. eThekwini alone has 285 pump stations in just for sewage. So in Johannesburg, the 400 to 500 pumps bringing water in and taking 70% of what comes in out as sewage are not operating, and what's 24/7, and they actually use every hour of the day, 365 days a year, to keep the system in balance. Now, what happens? The system starts draining, and we get air ingress. Air doesn't compress, water does. So when we start the system up, we're unable to scour, so to bleed the air. And what happens? We pop the 40 to 60-year-old infrastructure, which is asbestos piping, a lot of it, and we patch up. because we've only got budget to patch up. We haven't got budget to replace asbestos PVC like we started doing in the rest of the world 30 years ago. And PVC is not the answer from a chemistry perspective, but it is the answer from it is an answer from a mechanical perspective. The larger pipes are concrete and the likes. So you add all of these things in, you've got a perfect storm where all the problems are put together and the challenge is just too big. You need a very smart government, very smart people, and you don't need high temperatures to be able to overcome this. We unfortunately have very little of anything. And so the skills shortage is only a small component in reality. Then what happens is you have the bulk water supplier who is generally speaking on an Eskom grid, and their system does trip. The Eskom grid is not perfect. I remember in the 70s as a kid, we would have outages, and there would be an hour, half an hour, and there would be every second week or so. And in Durban, we would have water outages in summer, generally speaking, for a couple of hours, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, during the week, during summer. But what's happening here is we've got everything failing. Nothing talks to each other. And I've been without internet now for 2 weeks because the internet service providers crashed. The systems have crashed. They can't get me new SIM cards and the likes. And so we sit here, playing the fool. So when you have a resilient system, you're able to actually weather the storm a bit better. But the problem at the moment is that we are very vulnerable. Like eThekwini has not recovered and cannot recover. It doesn't have 20 billion to reinstate its sanitation and water systems. And nobody has that money. Now in Johannesburg alone, so take eThekwini and Ekurhuleni are roughly together a little bit bigger than Johannesburg in users. We've got to find something like 45 to 50 billion rand. So we're going to have to raise that money outside of the fiscus, because 59% households don't pay for water services in South Africa, somehow, not my number, Stats SA number, and we have to find that money and we have to start rebuilding the system. We can't replace it because Johannesburg system's 123 or 26 billion, so in Gauteng is roughly 250 billion. So in a nutshell, those are the numbers. Yes, it's not for sensitive viewers, but these are the realities, and I think once as a society we start accepting realities, using the right language, and hold government to account. And Minister Mchunu has been very clear, we must hold them to account. But this is local municipality issue. We have to hold them to account, otherwise the hole gets deeper. And it's not a wet hole down there, it's bone dry at the moment. So anyway, that's my frustrated summary at the moment as we're booting up. Hopefully the picture comes back, although you might not want to see this face today.
Thanks very much for that synopsis, Benoit. Before we shift over to Hamanth, Fred, what is the impact of all of this on business? Sure, it must be, tremendous. How do you function? How does business function at this level?
Brigitte, South African business is probably some of the most resilient business in the world in dealing with complexity. And we're used to dealing with complexity. However, there are issues that you can deal with as a business, and then there are issues that you just can't. At the moment, I must say I don't know how any business copes, because we've got the energy crisis, we've got the water crisis, we've got logistics challenges, and ironically, the three things that business need to operate is they need energy, they need water, and they need a working logistics system. And if that works, they can pretty much take care of everything and anything else. The problem that we've got is, water is the one thing that you cannot find an alternative for. So you can't generate your own water. Yeah, people are putting down boreholes and trying to do whatever they can, have backup tanks, etc. But those mitigate and they don't eliminate the risk. So that's why I think it's so important that business really understands the importance of putting their backing behind organizations such as the South African Water Chamber in order to engage really seriously with the issues that we're facing at the moment.
Thanks, Benoit. And now let's move over to you, Hamanth. You recently attended the WISA conference and also the conference in Copenhagen. Give us some feedback of what happened there and how that has an impact on our local situation.
Thanks, Brigetti, and good afternoon to everybody. In summary, the IWA Biennial Congress is an event that is held every 2 years. It was delayed due to COVID. Obviously, many of our events in the world have been delayed. Finally, it was held in September in Copenhagen after protracted delays and planning and replanning, and it's not easy with these global events. Lo and behold, we held a very successful conference there. We are anticipating in the region of 1,500 people due to various challenges, like visas, which were challenged given the Ukraine situation in Europe. People would appreciate that it's not always easy to get visas now into the Schengen states, and not timeously. The other challenge was the fact that China is not allowing any Chinese people to leave the country. Nonetheless, given those challenges, there were still 2,800 people that showed up, which is an unprecedented number compared to the events of the past. Sadly, the representation from the developing part of the world was to the extent of some 14%. We would like to think we can do better there. In future, we should do more to get visas, etc., more timeously. So there was a huge presence from, of course, the US and largely from the European region all over Europe and part of Asia. The conference was an amazing success. In summary, what happened there was we started the event with a very different type of utility leaders forum. This is where we had about 200 people from across the world, from at least 80 to 90 countries who run utilities across the world. So they're involved in municipalities and bulk water utilities. The agenda was amazing. You know, I was fortunate to give the kickoff talk, so to say, in the morning. The key issues in the world are still around climate change, how we deal with that, around innovation, how do we innovate ourselves to become more efficient, the issues of resilience, the issues of disaster recovery, and of course, digitization, which is a huge issue in terms of improving our operations, our data management, and our ability to see what's happening in terms of improving efficiency. There were many parallel tracks of the event. There were many awards that were awarded. For example, it's customary that we would make awards like the fellows and senior fellows of the IWA through a very rigorous process. These are a small group of people in the world that have really excelled and made a huge contribution to water and sanitation issues in the world. Then there was an event which is called the Project Innovation Awards event. This is a flagship awards event that IWA does at each biennial congress. So what we do here is, again, we have a very rigorous process where we have judging, etc., that occurs during the year. There are 6 categories, and within each categories of awards, you get a silver, gold, and a bronze. And so here we award the finest of the finest in the world. And these functions are normally held in the best of venues, and Copenhagen was an amazing host. A little about Copenhagen, lots of bicycles. The cab driver couldn't believe that if those bicycles were out here, that they would get stolen. Somehow he could not comprehend this from me. You know, when I explained to him that even our copper cables from the telephone and electricity system get stolen, and he goes, why would somebody steal a bicycle here in Copenhagen? Everybody's got one. So I realized there's no point explaining to this gentleman how all of this happens. They are very proud of the very innovative approach to water and sanitation, really, and the approach to wind power, solar power. I mean, here's a country that's really at the forefront of technology. You know, the mayor herself, the lady, was very boastful about the fact that the Bay Area in Copenhagen, they started 10 years ago to remediate it from the pollution, etc. And they actually have people swimming in there now every day. They encourage people to jump in the bay and swim. So I thought that was quite exciting, that people in the world can actually be doing this stuff. One would never have thought maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago that you couldn't do it in Durban, right? Well, lo and behold, we know you can't do that in Durban right now. So oftentimes I think it's a signal that we take things for granted until they deteriorate to a point and we realize, wow, our basic freedoms and the things that we had available are kind of diminishing, which is a huge wake-up call, I think, for the South African society, given the challenges recently of all the energy, power, water issues. Then I want to turn very quickly. Of course, there was a huge exhibition. Every event has a huge exhibition where you have the best companies of the world showing their technology, showing their approaches, happy to help utilities, countries, etc., to move to the forefront of adopting these technologies and making improvements. So a lot of learning, lots of learning there. Let me move quickly then to about last week, 2 weeks after the IWA event, again in September at the ICC in Sandton, the Water Institute of Southern Africa, WISA biennial conference, also delayed for the same reasons, but yes, again, unprecedented number of attendees, around 1,800 people, which was really great. The great thing I find about the IWA event, the WISA event, prior to that I attended the Singapore International Water Week, is this year, post-COVID, if I can use that term loosely, people have been so excited about meeting each other, given that we haven't met for 2.5 to 3 years, that the energy is it's just amazing when you go to these events. The learning, the sharing, the interest to want to help in this fraternity is really up there in the world from what I've seen in the past. So we come to the WISA forum, some great keynote speakers there. Again, I was privileged to be on the program committee. Day one, the minister opened the event, and I think he gave a really good and positive speech in South Africa here, our minister. Then it was followed by an amazing speaker we got from the Philippines, Perry, who has a long-standing history in terms of the private-public partnership of that utility in Manila, Philippines. They have about a 15, 20-year trajectory of a history of this contract, and it was really awesome to see some of the key performance indicators he was showing. For example, their water loss was at 69%. They're currently sitting at 16% or so. I think South Africa can learn a lot with this approach. Their number of staff per connections was just diabolically high. They brought that down remarkably low. So you can, from those kind of indicators, we could see the efficiencies. He was very gracious in sharing with us the lessons learned, the complexities, and very happy to help us, given that there appears to be an appetite in this country to go that route. Next day was followed by some more keynotes, some amount of keynotes on climate change, and then we had some engagement from a really interesting, innovative speaker, more an artist type person, a disabled person, who was talking about the need to take into account the needs of people that are disabled when it comes to water and sanitation delivery. Nobody appears to be thinking about this dimension. So that was really a very sharp message that he brought across. It was a lady from UNICEF who gave a great talk, keynote address on the modalities you use for community engagement, which is very important in our current situation in this country. So great learnings again, multiple tracks again, various sessions occurring simultaneously. Again, WISA also has awards in the form of fellows, etc. Great dinner evening. Everybody was so delighted and party spirit to be together and to be able to all meet. So the exhibition was great too. And the nice thing about the exhibition at WISA is they tried something different this year, which is you did not need to register for any part of the conference. You could walk into the ICC, just register there immediately without paying, and you could walk through the exhibition area. So it was entirely open to the public, which I think was great for the people, in terms of optimizing the bang for buck for the exhibitors and the companies, etc., to get the message out there on the products and the services. So there have been two great events, and I was fortunate to be at all. I've met some amazing people that I've caught up with again after all these years. So I was really excited about that. I've met some amazingly new people in the sector, both locally and globally. And I'd like to believe that all of these folk in this fraternity are ready, able, and willing to help the South African situation. We have a conduit through WISA for expertise in this country. We have a conduit through the IWA for expertise all across the world. So there is no lack, I believe, of expertise. We need to mobilize the political will. We may need to mobilize the right strategy and the action plan. And I think that we could then see the kind of traction that we need. So I think that I've said quite a mouthful there for now, but really I was exhilarated to be there. I'm all energized and back. Of course, one is not enjoying the load shedding and the water shedding and hearing about the notion that especially where I am here in Gauteng, that there is an issue of reducing water supply to municipalities by 35% by the large utility Rand Water. And this is because, they're not able to keep up with the demand. And one of the reasons for that demand is the weather and the temperature. And we all know that, we were expecting this temperature. I mean, there was an awesome presentation given by an expert on climate change. It was showing some amazing images of what we could expect in terms of temperatures going forward and how frightening the scenario is. So there we are. I do understand that water is somewhat being impacted by the load shedding problem in terms of energy. But as far as I know, in the times that I was at Rand Water, the arrangement with Eskom is that the water utilities, the bulk water utilities, would be the last in line to be load shedded in instances where they draw power directly from Eskom. There are instances where they draw power from a municipality or more. In that instances, of course, there could be maintenance issues, etc., etc. But, I read an article that the reservoirs were sitting at in the region of about 35-40% is what I read. I am aware that the strategy there is to keep the reservoir levels at 40 to 60%. So hence the throttling, if I use that word, reducing the supply to the municipalities. This brings altogether new challenges because firstly, in a bulk water network, our infrastructure is not geared up to have the right electronic systems for you to manipulate these pumps for variable supply. These are huge pumps. They need labor to go out into the field to open and close them. You can't always get the amount of opening and closing right. You could also break the spindles in the process, which is a bigger problem. So we're not geared for this kind of agility of all these adjustments we're doing to the engineering system on the one hand. On the other hand, the municipal folks who are receiving the water from Rand Water and then now have to reformulate how they would supply whom to with how much water. This is a huge challenge because if you look at that reticulation network, if you look at the skills level in the municipalities, really you need to be pretty sharp about how you're going to balance your system so that people in the high-lying areas are not negatively impacted and people in the low-lying areas are not receiving too much. This kind of stuff is complicated engineering and process technology. It's easier said than done. But this is my understanding of where we are right now with the challenges, and I gave you a flavor of what the energy is in the IWA and WISA in particular. Thank you.
Wow, thanks for that comprehensive feedback, Hamanth. Now, I did drop out due to a network issue on my side for a minute, and I'm not sure if you covered it. We'll take a quick break. So if you didn't cover it, I just wanted to know what your take was, Hamanth, on the situation in the Gauteng area in South Africa with regards to the current outages, because before we went online, you were saying that not all the outages are attributed to the effects of load shedding, that there were some other external factors in play as well. So we'll take a quick break, and if we can come back, if we can talk about that just very, very briefly.
Sure.
And welcome back. You are watching the Water Hour. We were talking about all the unintended consequences today of power outages and what effect that has on the supply of water, and of course the knock-on effect of no water to businesses and residents. So, Hamanth, if you can just maybe comment on this, your take on what's happening in Gauteng at the moment, where their water supply is being interrupted.
Sure. So, given my experience in rainwater as a utility, right, and given what I'm reading, in the last couple of days, my sense is the following. You need to understand that rainwater has basically two very large treatment plants. So they're based in the Vereeniging area. The source of water is the Vaal Dam, and the Vaal Dam gets topped up, in inverted commas, from the Lesotho Highlands process. There is no challenge, as far as I know, if you look at the figures of the Vaal Dam content, we don't have a water resource problem. There's water in the Vaal Dam. Okay, so why aren't we getting water through our taps? The water from the Vaal Dam is abstracted. It is purified through these two huge water treatment plants, and then it is pumped 65 kilometers upward, using energy, of course, to about 54, or the number may be 56 reservoirs, which are owned by rainwater. So the water is stored in those reservoirs. The policy, as far as I know, around the storage of water in those reservoirs is ideally we like to have around 60 to 80% full in those reservoirs. Now, with the increase in the demand, and that increase in demand was also seen during the COVID period, right? Increase in demand has reduced the reservoir capacity levels below 40%, I'm told in the region of 35%. Now, if the demand continues at that rate, those reservoirs will not reach between 60 to 80%. They will obviously continuously go lower and lower and then get depleted, and then you have a huge problem because you don't have any water. So the view that they've taken is they will reduce the supply to all of the customers, which is 17 municipalities, Johannesburg being the biggest, followed by Tshwane, Ekurhuleni, etc. Now, the municipalities get informed that they would no longer be supplied with X amount of water, but they will now receive X minus Y amount of water. The municipalities now have to reconfigure how they run their system to ensure that everybody gets some, and some don't get all, in layman's language, right? This is not easy to do. Neither is it easy for you, it's not like pressing a button and you can set up all the pumps that are and the valves that are running the rainwater system in order to only supply a certain amount. This is all a manual process. There are huge, huge valves. They require labor. They require you to go out in the field. You might not always get it right. It's a trial and error methodology, etc. So why don't we have enough water? Let's ask that question. We have enough in the dam. That's clear. We don't have enough coming out of the taps because we don't have enough going into the reservoirs. Why don't we have enough going into the reservoirs despite the increase in the demand? Because we're not able to supply more than a certain amount. What is that amount we can supply? My knowledge tells me it's in the region of 4,600 megaliters a day. So that's 4,600 million liters a day, which is, I think, their maximum capacity at rainwater. You can also understand that while all this is going on, you cannot have no maintenance going on because you're moving at full throttle, right? So that also sacrifices some other elements that could create other challenges downstream. So why aren't the reservoirs not filling up fast enough? Because we don't have enough to pump in, given the rate of what is being drawn out. Next problem, the municipalities are losing on average in this country around 40%. From the municipal meter to your house and my house, that reticulation system loses about 40%. At the same time, rainwater is trying to build more infrastructure, right, in order to produce more water and more treatment plants. However, in my knowledge, the rate at which that infrastructure is being built is delayed. My knowledge is that the rate of delay is in the area of about 3.5 to 4 years on average on a project. So you can appreciate if you delayed on your infrastructure augmentation, you cannot get those reservoirs full fast enough. At the same time, the municipalities are losing 40% of water. Can you imagine what kind of situation we're in now? It's a lose-lose for both sides. Now, the no-brainer in this whole thing is that if you reduce the water loss in the system, you may not even need to build that additional infrastructure, which is going to come at huge cost, right? But not enough is being done to plug the leaks in the municipal systems, to use the most sophisticated technologies. And there's some amazing technologies around, where you can even do satellite imaging, etc., which will detect leaks for you, but you need to get in there, you need to fix it. Of course, you want to fix the first and the biggest leaks first. Same situation in Nelson Mandela Bay. As you know, they're busy trying to fix leaks. So herein lies the intractable situation we find ourselves in now. I've classified the problem for you. You haven't asked me about the solution, but perhaps my colleague can prefer one or two options for solutions, because the situation does not look great, to be quite frank.
I know it sounds pretty bleak, from what you've just described there. So Benoit, I don't know if you want to jump in there and comment.
I'm getting WhatsApp to stop depressing people out there. But I think they semi in jest. But it's only when we have a crisis that people actually realize the extent of what we have. And we've been saying this for a while. In 2018, we managed to and support government, and with a lot of pressure and support, collaborate to get a master plan out. It said then our backlog just to catch up is 900 billion rand. Okay, so if you think we don't have a crisis or catastrophe, a nuclear implosion, you're wrong. 900 billion rands are a lot of money. Count 900 billion seconds, and you'll see how long that will. It is huge amount of money. That's a backlog. That's not for growth. That's just to catch up where we're at. So what we're supposed to be spending in the 8 metros is about 250 to 300 billion a year to replace and it will take us 10 years to get the distribution system for water and the conveyance system that takes the sewage out of our cities. We have to take it out. Otherwise, we'll die of diseases like they did before the first industrial revolution. So it's not just taking the water in, it's also taking it out. Roughly 70% is on average is the sewage. And that money can only come from our pockets. So, and the minister is very clear there, private sector participation, funding and the likes. What we've got to do, firstly, we're not allowed to invest in it at the moment, the way the legislation is and it's set up and all the likes, because we had a different dispensation. The doors have opened, but the conditions in South Africa is, to fix pipes, you need electricity. Okay, you can't use diesel gensets and the likes. It's just too expensive. It's 3 times the price. And there's not enough diesel in the country anymore because our refineries are closed. So what we have to do is we have to blend the solutions. Technology, we've got all over the place. And I could talk for 4 hours just introducing digitization, okay, as one of the silver bullets, the toolboxes that we can put on top of this to try and focus us in the right directions and all the likes. And on the 12th of September at the IWA, when Hamanth was there, they published the first IWA digital handbook. Before there was a white paper, and it's really good stuff and all this. There is no technology deficiency. There's a political ineptitude in the world where water, and California is suffering a very similar fate, except they don't have load shedding, internet shedding, and water shedding at the same time. So we're really blessed here. So what we've got to do is, and Fred was talking about it early on, is society has to pressurize government in making water, energy, and food, because they're interlinked, we operate at Nexus, as the priority for our Marshall Plan. And between society, government, and business, we have to fix it. Tonight at midnight, South Africa has been switched off. All the ports are going off, okay? There are no contingency plans because our ports are not privatized enough. So what's happening is private initiatives can't have a material impact. That means no fuel. So all of us who have diesel generators, for example, will not be able to top them up next week. And the strikers want, I think it's double-digit increases. Transnet doesn't have any money. It offered 1.5%, and last night offered 3%. So now we're not going to be able to bring the fuel to run some of the backup systems we have in Eskom and in Rand Water and in the metros. So when I say we got problems, I'm really being polite here, okay? Is we have to jump, all of us, and get our hands dirty. Nobody's going to do it for you, believe you me. And without water, we cannot exist. Forget business. And so what we've got to do is we've got to say technology is not the issue. The politicians, we cannot rely on them. They're only part of the equation. We have to get everybody together and break it down into bite-sized chunks and start managing the infrastructure, start replacing the infrastructure, and doing it in such a manner that it is highly focused. But believe you me, we are all going to be paying. Water and energy are probably going to land up being more than our medical aided food put together until we get over this crisis. And load shedding is here for 2 to 3 years according to Eskom, which means 5 years. Water shedding is only started and it's going to be here for 10 years. Now, if we want to circumvent that, we've got to plow in Joburg 26 billion now. We don't have to replace everything. 26 billion is the arrears now. Okay, so if you do the numbers and 59% of households are paying for the service, you'll see it's a lot of money. So people are just going to, if they don't semigrate, they'll emigrate because, we're going to have to each start paying 50, 100,000 rand a month to put our stuff. If you do the numbers, put it together. So 900 billion rand's a lot of money. And it's double the debt of Eskom 2 years ago. Eskom's gone from 450 to about 400 billion now. It's double the debt. And nobody listened. Okay? It was in the media, it was everything in 2018. Nobody, when I say they didn't listen, they saw it, they read it, etc. Guys, we've got a 900 billion hole. And you know what? The money only comes from people. It doesn't come from government. People pay taxes and levies and duties and all the like. And business can't shoulder it all. Return on investment in business South Africa is not good at the moment. So we've got to spread that load and everybody's got to do the thing. And this is why we have the water chamber, is to try. We can support and do so much, but we need far more members. Okay, we need to have 100, 200,000 members. Everybody says it's not my problem. Okay, I'm doing well in the rest of Africa. I'm not worried about South Africa. I live here, but I do my business in the rest of Africa. It's much easier. The supply chain is easier and all the likes. So we've got to start looking inwards, but really society must hold government to account as we hold business to account. And, we can't have, I've got family in the north, the older areas where the bulk lines are going through. They've been for over a year out of water, Monday to Friday, 6 in the morning to 6 at night. Okay, it's got nothing to do with rainwater. It's got nothing to do with the reservoirs. It's just the system fails every day and every night they fix it because they're patching up the pipes. They should replace it. And the norm is usually within 6 months, if a bulk line pops twice in a kilometer, you replace it. We need 23 billion rand in Johannesburg, so we need to set up PayPal. We can use blockchain to make sure that the money comes from the right places and goes to the right places. And we're going to have to find 23 billion rand in Johannesburg. And those who are laughing at me, okay, when your tap is empty, remember the numbers. So I'm in the right mood today to do this because I've got nothing at the moment except a little bit of bandwidth, coming through. But the reality is we've got a storm. We can sort it out. It's not a technology issue. It's our problem. And we need to start standing up and doing that. And we have the ability to do that. As Hamanth has said, we've got the networks here, but we've also got access to the global skills to do this. And there's an abundance of those skills. And a lot of people want to see South Africa succeed because then Southern Africa succeeds. Okay, and that's why we're still getting foreign aid. It's the only reason, because Southern Africa can only succeed if South Africa succeeds. So we really need to start waking up. And, if you don't believe what's being put in the news, well, when your tap's empty, just remember what we said, and let's get into it. And businesses cannot use boreholes. The water, the yields in South Africa are very low in general. The water is quite sweet and saline. And in actual, it's polluted by a lot of our sewage because our sewage plants, 97% don't work. Okay, so now we've polluted our own backup resource. Let's just think about that. What are we doing about the 97% of sewage plants that could not get a measly 90%? The permits require 99% compliance. They could not get 90%, 97% of them. The minister said actually 99% are defunct. He said it's basically all of us. So I think the minister is more or less right, okay, because we're splitting hairs here on 2-3%. But we need to protect our environment. And as Hamanth said, we're getting our raw water for Gauteng from the integrated river system that is heavily polluted. And what we're doing is we're diluting it with water from the Tugela in KZN that we're pumping across at night. and also from Lesotho Highlands. Not originally was to dilute the mine salinity, but now it's actually to dilute the sewage in the system, because Rand water systems and all of our water plants, bulk water plants, are not designed to treat sewage. Sewage plants are designed to do that. So now we're not going to trust, and our blue drops were not as bad as potable water as our green drops. So, but there's a big question mark. How long will our blue drop in actual fact be safe? And in the big cities, they are fairly threatened. And that's not a good thing, because we can't afford to all start, getting sick and all the likes. So everything's interlinked. It's quite complex. And we've got a deck of cards falling at the moment. We've got to stop that. And we really, really have to. And I think we can.
Benoit, thanks very much. That picture is an interesting one, for want of a better description there. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, Fred, if I can ask you to just talk on, the picture is rather bleak. As Benoit said, it's not a lack of, and I think Hamanth said the same thing, it's not a lack of technology that we've got here, and it's not a lack of skills. And when we have challenges, it's an opportunity to innovate. So how do we move forward? Fred, if I can get your take on that when we come back after the break. Thank you for staying with us. You are watching the Water Hour, coming to you live from South Africa. Fred, if I can ask you for a comment on how do we innovate, what are the solutions, and how can people that are watching be part of the change that we need to turn things around?
Thanks, Brigitte. I think Benoit has highlighted the first step. We are South Africa and we have a water problem. It's an admission. It's the starting point. Until we can stand there and say we have a crisis, we probably just won't get anything done. In my early life, I was in the footwear industry, and there was a story going around about a footwear salesman that went into Africa, came back and reported back to his board and said, listen, guys, there's absolutely no market in Africa. People don't wear shoes. And the next a new salesperson was appointed, and he went into Africa, and he came back and he was absolutely jubilant. He says, guys, you won't understand the market in Africa. No one wears shoes. We can sell a pair of shoes to everyone. So it's really, the first recognition is that we have a problem. The second recognition is that it creates an incredible opportunity for business, and to be the Marshall Plan that can turn this country around. Now, I think it's important to understand, and I started off and I said South Africans are brilliant at managing complexity. It's what we do, it's who we are, and we're dealing here with a complex systems problem. Now, in order to address a complex problem, the first thing that you need to do is you need to have proper information. So you've got to have a common point of truth, and you've got to have and that's also the foundation of a market. We spoke earlier about having to raise money, and I see some, Julius said they'd be very happy to get involved in raising that funding and funding it. But in order to do that, we've got to have a common point of truth, and we've got to say, this is where we are, this is what we've got to do. The next thing that's important is we need to have that political buy-in and stakeholder management. So we need the support, and I think we're getting the messages that government is understanding the complexity of the problem, and at the end of the day is in a position where we will get that level of support. Once we have that, we need to prioritize where's our interventions, and throughout this whole discussion, there were a couple of points that came across, the biggest of which is we're losing in excess of 41% of our water in non-revenue water. It's the most logical point to start, and we shouldn't even be considering anything else until we can stop the leaking bucket. The important thing is also, we know the Pareto principle applies, so we know that we probably need to spend 20% of the money to get 80% of the return. And that can only be done through proper information and a central point where we can have a clear strategy that says this is our intervention tomorrow. And just by the way, Benoit referred to 9 billion rands worth of losses per year. That's a lot of money that we can use to start leveraging a campaign to address the non-revenue water. So effectively, we've got 9 billion rands worth of cash in the system that can be freed up annually. But someone needs to bridge the funding so that we can start at some point in time, so that we can start fixing the pipes, which will then free up both the water and the money so that we can put a comprehensive program in place. We then get to the point of the issue of governance, because no one's going to put money into a system if there's no proper governance structure. But technology allows us to do that. And the application of blockchain and distributed ledger and all of those technologies can be applied in order to make a difference. So the key thing from our perspective is, how do we design a structure that everybody is comfortable with? How do we have a common set of information with which the market will be comfortable to invest its money in? How do we provide a governance structure to do that? And the most important thing is we should be starting yesterday. So it's not a question of, are there solutions? Of course there's solutions. Technologically, there's many. Hamanth spoke about all the technologies, and we've got access to global best practice. Many of them are local. We've got technology, we've got people, we've got everything. Two things are missing: a framework within which to deliver this, and on the other hand, the political will that says, okay, we can start tomorrow. And that's really the agenda that we're driving as the chamber, is how do we aggregate all of business behind a single point of interaction with government to say, you know what, we're ready. You've got 9 billion rand within your system that we can unlock. For starters, we can start with this. We can create an environment. We can then turn to the investment community and we can say, we can create a governance framework that you'll be comfortable with. We can then go to the engineering fraternity and we say, guys, we need to address these priorities. We can go to the communities and we can engage and say we're going to create so much employment. And now you have a comprehensive strategy. But all of that comes down to leadership. All of that comes down to decision making. All of that comes down to, what are we doing tomorrow? Not next week. And you know what? We now have the crisis that we've been speaking about for years. It's here. So the important thing is, what are we doing tomorrow? And again, I would just like to tell business, the opportunity that this chaos presents is enormous. We understand the risks, we can manage those risks, we can price the risks, and we can engage constructively with government in order to deliver on this and be the underpin for economic growth. So I'm the guy that looks at the market and says, no one's wearing shoes. We've got shoes. We just need someone to understand what a difference this will make in their life. And then if we take hands with all of the stakeholders, we can engage and we can unlock this in a very, very short period of time. South Africa has the skills. It's got the access to the technology globally. There's financiers that are available, even on this podcast today. What we really need is just to go ahead and a structure within which we can lodge this, and I believe we can start making a difference tomorrow. If we don't, then the picture that Benoit has painted will be with us for a long time. We had these same discussions in early 2008 around the energy sector. It was never addressed properly, and we're now sitting in 2022, and it's far worse than it was in 2028. Let's not repeat the lessons that we've learned.
Thanks very much for that summary. I think there's absolutely no doubt in our minds from this conversation today that, as you rightly said, we needed to start yesterday. We need to turn the ship around. We're at the top of the hour. We'll take a very quick break, and when we come back, can I ask each of you just to give us a call to action for people that are watching, for citizens out there, a call to action for government and call to action for business from each of you, just in closing as a means of summary.
You're on mute, Bridgetti.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. I think we've had one of the most frank conversations we've had on the Water Hour so far. It's very necessary that we have this frank conversations. Otherwise, we can't move forward. So, just in closing, your call to action, Benoit, Hamanth, and then we'll end with you, Fred.
Thank you, Bridgetti, and to our listeners. Yes, I think we have the perfect opportunity to start implementing all of the policy documents, from the master plan to the NIP 2050 to the current draft of Integrated Water Resource 3. Let's just, we need talk shops, but now let's follow through, and let's start with the action shops. And some of the comments, we do have the technology to ensure that sticky fingers do not get a hair's breadth close to any of the private sector funding that will come in. So I don't believe that is an issue at all. And in actual fact, if you ask the telecom networks, they've mastered it too. So we'll be able to make sure that every billion rand goes to the right places and the likes. So that shouldn't be a deterrent. And in actual fact, water is a good investment. We always need it. It's not going to go out of fashion. Okay, it's the way it's presented that changes. We always need water. It's the fundamental lubricant. And it just needs to be the priority. And thanks a lot for the show, Bridgetti.
Thanks very much. Hamanth, if I can ask you for a call to action.
Thank you. Much appreciated. What I'd like to say is to the citizens, firstly, respect water. I think it's important that we become aware that we need to respect water, use it diligently, and don't pollute. I think those are three important things for the citizens. That they should expect continuous water supply 24/7, I believe that is their right. South Africa is known to have 24/7 of water supply. It has never been a country with intermittent water supply. We're fast getting there, but it has never come from there, ever. To the businesses, again, respect water, use it wisely, of course, in your processes, but especially to business now. Many opportunities for businesses in the water and sanitation sector to come forward. Come forward. Financiers, technology operators, consultants, come forward. Talk to us. Let's put a plan together so that we can work together to going somewhere with all of this. Lastly, to government. If you keep doing the things you've done in the past, we're never going to get very far. I think that lesson we need to understand very clearly. That the way we've been doing things in the past is the reason why we are where we are today. So let's get a lot more innovative and adaptive. For example, this architecture that we have in the water cycle in South Africa, where the municipalities run the water and sewage systems, and the Department of Water Affairs is separate and has no jurisdiction over them, but deals with policy and regulation. This is no longer sustainable. We need one lens through which we manage the entire water cycle, from catchment to tap. Unless we don't do that, as has been shown across the world, we will never be able to optimize across the entire value chain. We're always going to play the blame game. So let's stop blaming. Let's change what we need to do fast. And let's move ahead to get South Africa out of this challenge. South Africa is known to be innovative. And I do believe if we do the right things now very quickly, we can overcome. In the absence of that action, I hate to think what the future would look like here. Thank you.
Well said, Hamanth. Thank you for that. Fred, your final comment?
Yeah, Brigitte, my view is just very clear. If you look at the where there's been successes, if you look at the motor industry when they went through a very difficult time, it's only when they all came together and engaged collectively with government. Unfortunately, we as business, we always and it's been a function of the way that things have been set up. We think that if we're talking here to a politician or if we doing this or whatever, and everybody's trying to do their little thing in isolation, it's not going to change anything. It's only when we all come together in an organization such as the South African Water Chamber, where we can collectively unlock the opportunities for everyone. And once we've done that, then there is more opportunity in the water sector. Benoit spoke about close on R1 trillion worth of investment required. Believe me, we're going to have a shortage of, we will be lining up to get people and to employ and to get companies started in the industry, because whoever is here, there's not enough to do that work. But in order for us to get there, we have to put all of our efforts together. We have to also, the facts are the facts. And we have a governance problem. We have a water problem. We have an infrastructure problem. All of that, it's a given. It's like going to the AA. I'm an alcoholic. I accept it. Done. Now, what are the 7 steps that take us forward in order to achieve this? And that's where we are. We're at that point where if we keep just regurgitating the fact that government is this and this and the history and everything, it's important to understand. But when you're driving your car, the rear view mirrors are only there to warn you about what's happening at the back. You got to look out the windscreen, and we as business have got to come together and say, this is the plan, this is how we're going to finance it, this is how we're going to put it together, and these are efforts collectively, and then we can move forward.
I think that's a great note on which to end the show. Thank you, gentlemen. Much appreciated. Thank you to our viewers out there. If you're watching this on the replay, please do share this. This is probably one of the most important conversations that we've had on the Water Hour. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you back on the next episode.